CNN is one of the largest American cable news network and is also a leader in mainstream fake news. Since the 2020 election, the negative press has increased immensely for CNN. In November 2020, it was reported that AT&T, CNN's parent company, was looking to sell the cable news station to pay off its massive $150 billion debt. In December, Project Veritas released its recording of CNN's 9 a.m. conference calls with its president, Jeff Zucker, and his senior staff for one whole month. It exposed many of their biased agendas, including demoralizing Trump and calling his competitor Fox News racist.
And I think that we cannot just let it be normalized. He is all over the place and acting erratically, and I think we need to lean into that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you're going to talk about the story, I think it's unavoidable that you have to talk about the naked racism of Tucker Carlson, because that's really what drove this anti-diversity push. You know, Trump watches Tucker Carlson show and then reacts. And just as sort of the white supremacy hour they have on Fox News every night, I think you can't disconnect the two.
On January 12th, CNN announced that CNN Airport Network will end its operation on March 31st, 2021. The airport network was launched in 1991 and included portions of news and other Warner Media networks across 58 airports in the country. The cancellation is due to the decline in travel amid the pandemic and all the new ways people are consuming news on their personal devices today. CNN President Zucker stated that the shutdown of the airport network was due to the steep decline in airport traffic because of COVID-19. But CNN doesn't seem to be that upset about China's handling of the virus which caused the outbreak in the first place. In fact, CNN has helped the Chinese Communist regime with promoting its virus propaganda. In March 2020, when the coronavirus just hit America, Tucker Carlson of Fox News slammed CNN, saying that the network's downplaying of China's role in the pandemic is not enough, but they were parroting CCP's propaganda. Carlson showed a clip of CNN praising China for sending ventilators en masse to Europe to rescue their healthcare system.
It was China that came to the rescue as Italy shook, sending medical personnel, 9 pallets of ventilators, electrocardiographs, and tens of thousands of masks, all desperately needed by a healthcare system in crisis and appreciated by Italians stuck at home singing China's praise.
On the issue of the origin of the CCP virus, CNN anchor Chris Cuomo, the brother of New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, was already helping the CCP exonerate themselves back in March of 2020.
The idea, well, did come from China. Then why doesn't Fauci and other top health officials, why don't they call it that? You know why? Because it could have come from anywhere.
Cuomo also questioned whether the virus was already in the U.S. as early as of October 2019, which was the peak of the flu season. Cuomo's comments, of course, made Beijing very excited. The regime's state-owned media frequently quoted his words, which helped the party to shift the blame onto the U.S. So why was CNN speaking for the CCP? Helen Rowley is an author and senior contributor at The Federalist. She said you often see representatives from American companies with financial ties to China naturally become defenders of the CCP's policies and spreading the CCP's propaganda. The financial ties mean these Americans will be much less likely to challenge China's human rights record or unacceptable demands such as technology transfer. Among all the companies which cooperate with the CCP, the mainstream media holds many seats, according to Jinhua Zhang, a professor at the Institute of Journalism at the National Taiwan University. These media and advertisers started to censor different types of speech as well as the influence of those speech. Zhang said that's because the ones who haven't entered the Chinese market want a seat, and those who are already in the market don't want their status to be threatened. These actions foster the socialist force, which is influencing the whole world behind the scenes. Under the drive of large market share, its potential profit, some U.S. media outlets have chosen to grovel to the Chinese Communist Party. Now, let's dig deeper into the business relationships between cable news media outlets in America and the CCP. We will go through them one by one. Now, CNN, short for Cable News Network, is owned and operated by Warner Media. Warner Media's investment in the China market can date back to 18 years ago. According to Sina Finance, the news division of a top Chinese technology company, Warner Brothers, a subsidiary of Warner Media, invested in Shanghai Paradise Warner Cinema City in early 2002, shortly after China joined the WTO. Around the same time, Warner Brothers also became the shareholder of Hong Kong Broadband Network, a subsidiary of City Telecom of Hong Kong. The Paley International Council, established in 1975, chose to host its first Asian summit in Beijing in 2002, which was attended by Warner Media along with BBC, Radio France National, CBS, Disney Group, and various Chinese media companies. For this to happen, Beijing has to give the credit to an old friend of the CCP, Henry Kissinger, who was the vice president of the council at the time. One of the most important topics discussed at the 2002 summit was developing the Chinese media market. The following year, in 2003, Warner Media invested in Shanghai Yongwei Cinema City, an asset of the Shanghai Film Group, and held 49% of its shares. In 2004, Warner Brothers and Chinese multinational conglomerate Dalian Wanda Group had reached an agreement to work together to establish and co-operate Warner Brothers Cinema in China. In order to strictly control the Chinese people's way of thinking, the CCP has long set its foot in movie theaters and imposed a number of requirements on film production. An anonymous media director in China once said that the CCP wanted to have some movies that praised the party to play across the nation, but some foreign-owned cinemas had rejected the idea out of the concern of not being able to generate enough profit. This was the exact moment the CCP media authorities realized the risk of welcoming foreign-owned cinemas. Towards the end of 2005, the CCP issued a new guidance for the introduction of foreign investment in the field of culture. The guidance requires Chinese companies to be the major stakeholder in newly established cinema companies. In 2006, Warner Media withdrew from the Chinese theater market mainly because of this requirement, but later the compound annual growth rate of 45% in China's entertainment industry lured Warner Media back. In 2012, the total number of movie screens in China reached 13,000, making it the country with the second highest number of screens after the US. It was the golden time for Chinese cinema investments, and that's when Warner Media dived right back in. In 2015, Warner Media and China's media capital announced the establishment of the joint venture Flagship Entertainment, in which the CMC holds 51% and Warner Brothers hold 49% of its shares. Warner Brothers once wanted to be the major shareholder in the Chinese cinema industry, but is now willing to be the minority. Helen Raleigh pointed out that when American companies work with the CCP-backed entities, such as the CMC, they are subject to the CCP's use of its laws to advance its global ambitions, including their cybersecurity law. This includes forced technology transfer, leaving companies and data subject to random searches from the CCP. Companies are also forced to build data centers in China where the CCP can observe the data directly. All of this poses a national security risk for the United States. The relationship entanglement between Warner Media, CNN, and China goes even further. CNN's president Jeff Zucker works internally with Turner Sports, and Turner Sports works directly with the NBA to broadcast games in China. Now, it should be clear as to why CNN is always favorable to the communist China. Would you expect them to speak poorly of their business partners? Some may even say they're masters. Next, let's talk about CBS. Columbia Broadcasting Systems, or CBS, was founded in 1927 and headquartered in New York. In recent years, CBS has been expanding and investing heavily in the China market. In December 2010, the CBN Weekly magazine by China Business Network Media published an article named CBS China Business. The article said, although it's difficult for foreign TV businesses to land in China, CBS didn't miss the huge market. The internet is the big playground for CBS. Few people know that CBS Interactive, or CBSI, a subsidiary of CBS Entertainment Group, is the largest specialized interactive media company in China. It holds direct offices in Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Jing'an, and Chengdu, which are 5 major cities in the mainland. After 2010, China became CBSI's largest market outside of America. According to CBSI's own data, revenue generated from China's market accounts for 10% of its global revenue. The business growth rate in China is about 40%, which is significantly higher than its global average. CBS is also trying to cooperate with the CCP's mouthpiece, Xinhua News Agency. Some reports say Xinhua News Agency hopes to land in North America with help from the CBS. The two sides also want to collaborate on business development projects for smartphones and iPads. Like any other mainstream media who have befriended the CCP, CBS is gradually losing its integrity and starting to cooperate with the CCP's rules of censorship. In May 2019, CBS launched the legal television series, The Good Fight. One of its episodes in Season 3 was partially removed by CBS as it was mocking the censorship in China. Midway through the episode, a black screen came up and displayed the words, "CBS has censored this content." By doing that, CBS was telling the world that if you want to do business in China, you need to know how to flatter the CCP and comply with their rules of censorship. Allegedly, The Good Fight had also touched on the persecution of Falun Gong, the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989, and the analogy of Xi Jinping with Winnie the Pooh. However, all these are considered to be taboo by the CCP, and CBS has to censor them. But 20 years ago, CBS was once a media of integrity. When the CCP first cracked down on the Falun Gong in 1999, almost every media outlet around the world was silent about it. Some even republished the CCP's malicious propaganda. CBS, on the contrary, had repeatedly reported the true situation in China on the persecution of Falun Gong. Things have changed over time. Once you decide to work with the CCP out of monetary interest or the proverbial signing of your soul to the devil, you will have to leave all your moral integrity and principles behind. Now, let's take a look at ABC. The American Broadcast Company, or ABC, was acquired by Walt Disney in 1996. Disney has a deep-rooted financial stake in the Chinese economy controlled by the CCP. In November 2009, the Chinese government approved plans to create Disney World theme park in Shanghai. The project cost approximately $3.6 trillion with financial help from several large Chinese state-owned enterprises. After construction was completed, Disney only retained 43% of the property, while the Communist Party-controlled Shanghai Shandai Group took the remaining 57%. ABC also owns the sports cable channel ESPN. In 2019, during the Hong Kong pro-democracy movement, Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey posted a tweet saying, "Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong." The tweet immediately received enormous backlash among Chinese media. Tencent's holding, the massive Chinese conglomerate that operates as the exclusive official digital partner of the NBA in China, announced that it will indefinitely suspend media coverage of anything related to Morey. The Rockets, who were the second most popular NBA team in China, were threatened to be canceled along with the entire basketball association. Under the pressure of boycott from the Chinese market, the NBA chose to take the convenient non-political stance. It had Morey retract his tweet, and the association apologized to the Chinese fans, saying the NBA was extremely disappointed in Morey's inappropriate tweet. ESPN soon stood with the NBA to keep its financial position. ESPN's senior news director reportedly instructed staff to avoid discussing Chinese politics or Daryl Morey's pro-Hong Kong tweet if they were asked. According to Helen Raleigh, American companies established these financial ties with Chinese companies to gain access to China's massive consumer market of 1.4 billion people. ABC subsidiaries such as ESPN and ABC News need to appease the CCP, whether it be via positive news coverage or complying with cybersecurity laws, to keep their programs on Chinese screens for big money. It is all at the expense of Americans' freedom of speech. Morey was expressing his own views using his personal Twitter account on the suppression of the pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong. There wasn't anything wrong about it. That was his right of free speech. Now, at the end of our list, we have NBC and MSNBC. Both NBC and MSNBC News are operated by NBC Universal, which has extensive financial ties to the CCP. In November 2010, NBC signed an agreement with Xinhua Chinese state-run media organization to establish business cooperation in international broadcast news. In February 2020, the Trump administration designated 5 state-run Chinese news outlets operating in the U.S. as foreign missions, and Xinhua News Agency was number 1 on that list. These news outlets are not independent but directly controlled by the CCP. In 2015, NBC Universal agreed to license Chinese tech company Baidu's new video network platform, iQIYI, and advertised it in the heart of Times Square, New York City. In 2018, Communist China started its own invasion. CMC Capital Partners, a Beijing investment group with financial and technology oversight from the CCP, acquired full ownership of NBC Universal's animation studio Oriental DreamWorks, also known as Shanghai Pearl Studio, one of the first major Hollywood-China tie-ups. How can the CCP, America's #1 threat, be allowed to buy their way into influence over American citizens? When the big scandal between Democrat Congressman Eric Swalwell and the CCP spy Fang Feng first broke last December, the mainstream media ignored it. CNN devoted only 3 minutes and 16 seconds to the news. ABC, CBS, NBC, and MSNBC had zero coverage on it. Have you ever wondered why? Well, after you take a look at the intricate relationships between these legacy media companies and the Chinese Communist Party, it is easy to understand the oddities we see here. However, we should all remember what really makes a media company prosperous and lasting is its values and the trust it earns from their audience. Now, as more behind-the-scenes deals are surfacing, audiences are leaving for more truth-telling alternatives. This is evident with the recent decline in views of these legacy media. If they don't correct their path quickly, they may be facing extinction.